Hello everyone, our channel selects viewpoints and analytical articles from think tanks and well-known figures within the Chinese internet and presents them to Western readers so that everyone can understand how China thinks. If you find this helpful, please subscribe, hit the like button and share our channel. Thank you. It should be emphasized that the content we present reflects only the original author's views. Our aim is merely to enhance readers' understanding of perspectives from the Chinese intellectual and policymaking circles. What makes today's program particularly interesting is that it reads almost like a story, full of corporate politics and palace coup-style intrigue. You can approach it with a sense of curiosity, as if watching a drama unfold. It's rich in detail, the kind that can only be found in native Chinese language media. We're happy to present it to all of you. To be honest, after reading the recent reports about Nexperia and Wingtech, we truly feel that Europe has grown old and conservative. By contrast, this generation of Chinese entrepreneurs resembles the American cowboys of the past, rebellious, ambitious, and visionary, yet often unwilling to play by the rules. What many may not know is that our protagonist, Xuezheng, was fined several $million by China's securities regulators just in 2024 for alleged insider trading. Clearly, Zhang is definitely not a man who stays quietly within the lines, but Europe, for its part, seems to have lost its sense of ambition. The world is still far from settling down. With that context in mind, let's now listen to the voices from inside China's industrial semiconductor community.
Published on Chinese internet on October 17, 2025. Xuezheng set out to dismiss several executives, but he did not expect to be overturned by a coordinated move from within. Now disheartened, he has left the Netherlands. During China's National Day holiday, the CEO of Nexperia, Xuezheng, was suspended from performing his duties. Wingtech's shareholding in Nexperia was placed under custodianship. Wingtech had spent 33.4 billion renminbi to acquire control of Nexperia. Today, that asset is gradually slipping out of its grasp. Pressure from the United States reshaped the Dutch government's policy stance, and it shattered the already fragile trust among Nexperia's senior leaders. On core questions, how to position Nexperia and how to expand its global business, Zhang found himself in deep conflict with the company's chief legal officer and its chief financial officer. He intended to remove a few executives. Instead, they banded together and removed him. Who pushed Zhang aside? Zhang has been Nexperia's CEO already for 5 years. In December 2019,
Wingtech completed the purchase of 79.98% of Nexperia for 26.854 billion renminbi,
and later took its stake to 100%. It employed multiple financing tools and, over several rounds, spent more than 33 billion renminbi. It was the largest semiconductor acquisition ever made by a Chinese company, and the first time a Chinese buyer had acquired a globally leading chipmaker. On March 25, 2020, then Chief Executive Franz Schepper chose to retire early and step down from the board. At the same time, Zhang, then chair of Nexperia's board, took over as CEO. Franz Schepper is a veteran of NXP. Nexperia originated from NXP's standard products business. He began his career in IT and, before Nexperia became independent, served as general manager of that unit, spending nearly 2 decades across the company. He also managed one of Nexperia's core wafer fabs in Hamburg, Germany. That Hamburg fab produces 8-inch wafers with a monthly capacity of around 35,000. Each year, those wafers become some 70 billion devices, making it the world's largest wafer facility for small signal and diode discrete components. I have decided not to extend my 4-year term. It is now time for Wingtech, as the controlling shareholder, to decide Nexperia's future leadership, Franz said when he stepped down. Today, the company's chief financial officer and acting CEO is Stefan Tilger. He began at Philips and NXP, held multiple finance roles, and joined Nexperia in 2017 as vice president of global business controlling. Wingtech's leadership describes him as highly capable and personally flexible. After the previous CFO retired in 2021, Stefan's expertise earned him the CFO role. The company's chief legal officer is Ruben Lichtenberg. After Wingtech acquired Nexperia, he took charge of global legal and IP, and he also serves as a statutory director of Nexperia until 2022. Because of the pandemic, Zhang worked from China, managing the core team online. Starting in 2022, he relocated to the Netherlands. For a time, it was a honeymoon period between Zhang and his senior team. There was a period when relations were excellent. We would eat together and share drinks, Wingtech managers recall. Then outside pressure arrived. In January 2023, the United States, the Netherlands, and Japan reached an agreement. Under U.S. pressure, the Netherlands and Japan moved to restrict exports of semiconductor equipment to China. Dutch equipment giant ASML was also affected. In 2024, ASML was not only barred from selling EUV tools to China, some DUV export licenses were revoked by the Dutch government as well. Both Nexperia and ASML traced their corporate lineage to Philips. When ASML's exports to China came under controls, Nexperia's leadership understandably felt exposed. In response, Nexperia created a new corporate affairs department. It hired a leader with many years of Dutch diplomatic experience and began proactive engagement with the Dutch Ministry of Economic Affairs. The two sides discussed how the company should respond amid rising geopolitical tensions and whether changes to Nexperia's governance could guarantee its independence. The company worried it would not be recognized as Dutch, but instead be labeled simply as Chinese-owned. Through corporate affairs, Nexperia sought Dutch government recognition and a European level endorsement of its status as a key Dutch semiconductor player. It was at this moment that a serious split emerged inside the leadership team: how to respond to U.S. pressure and how to manage relations with the Dutch ministry. On these issues, the management team diverged sharply. The brief period of goodwill between Zhang and several executives came to an end. In September 2025, Zhang moved to dismiss those executives. He did not expect the three to strike back and succeed. Wingtech executives say Zhang took it personally. The blow was heavy. The core dispute unfolded hereby. At the end of 2023, Nexperia opened talks with the Dutch Ministry of Economic Affairs. Through July 2024, after multiple rounds of discussion, the main topics were whether Nexperia's governance needed to change to ensure independence, whether the Dutch government should step up oversight, and whether shareholder control should be reduced. One of the ministry's demands was that Nexperia must have a Dutch national on its board. This is why Chief Legal Officer Ruben Lichtenberg was appointed as a director. Former Wingtech chair Zhang Xuezheng had also served as a director at Nexperia. In July this year, she stepped down as Wingtech's chair and subsequently left Nexperia's board as well. Until October 2025, Nexperia's board consisted of Zhang, Xuezheng, and Ruben Lichtenberg. The sharpest point of contention between the ministry and Wingtech was the demand to establish a supervisory board. This supervisory board in the Netherlands is not the same as the one in China. In the Dutch system, it functions more like a shareholders' body. Its members vote on major corporate decisions, a Wingtech executive explained. The Dutch side wanted the supervisory board not only to hold voting power, but also to wield a veto over nearly 20 reserved matters. Those reserved matters included transferring IP or technology outside the European Union, approving any investment anywhere in the world above $1 million, hiring R&D staff in China, and even separating Nexperia's internal networks in China and Europe. The board would have a veto across this entire list, the Wingtech executive said. After a detailed legal review, we could not accept that. From a listed company perspective, agreeing to these points would amount to yielding part of our control. That is why we have wrestled with the ministry over governance throughout 2024. Wingtech argued that, under Dutch law, Nexperia is not required to create a supervisory board, and that not having one does not violate any mandatory legal provision. In a letter dated April 17, 2024, Nexperia asked the ministry for equal treatment, to be treated like peer companies headquartered in the Netherlands, run under Dutch law, and owned by foreign shareholders. On October 17th, Wingtech told Yikai that the company and Nexperia had been actively discussing the possibility of a supervisory board with the ministry. The process, they said, was not a one-sided compliance rectification, but a defense of lawful rights after clarifying the legal boundaries. Nexperia agrees in principle to a supervisory board, but only if its decision-making independence is protected as a subsidiary of a listed company with robust internal controls and not subjected to extra-market interference. To date, Nexperia has not been officially recognized and has not even been admitted into the Netherlands Semicon Alliance, Wingtech said. Selling a stake in Nexperia and a second listing also entered the discussion. Several executives were keen to sell a partial stake to European investors and even to pursue an independent overseas listing for Nexperia. The current CFO is very proactive on this. He has already toured Europe sounding out investors. Of course, his personal incentives are aligned. If he could drive a deal of this size, his bonus would be very large, a Wingtech executive said. The unresolved disputes between Zhang and his executives and between Nexperia and the Dutch ministry ignited when the U.S. applied the 50% ownership look-through rule to its entity list. Zhang originally intended to dismiss those executives. First, in early September 2025, Nexperia's HR department began talks on the company's behalf with the chief legal officer and other executives about ending their employment. In our view, their performance had involved lapses over a period of time, the cumulative effect of many issues. We also felt their more conservative stance no longer fit the company's future strategy, a Wingtech executive recalled. By Wingtech's account, both sides had basically reached agreement, pending only a formal signing. The plan was to issue a joint announcement to preserve face for long-serving and senior managers. Then on September 29, 2025, the U.S. Department of Commerce expanded the 50% look-through rule under the entity list. Under that rule, Nexperia, being a controlled subsidiary of Wingtech, could also be subject to export controls. On September 30, 2025, local time in the Netherlands, the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Policy issued a ministerial order to Nexperia. It barred any adjustment to assets, intellectual property, business, or personnel across 30 corporate entities worldwide, effective for 1 year. From Wingtech's perspective, the clause blocking changes to key personnel effectively protected the three executives. With the order in hand, they returned to their positions. On October 1, 2025, Nexperia's statutory director and chief legal officer, backed by the chief financial officer and the chief operating officer, filed an urgent request with the Enterprise Chamber of the Amsterdam Court of Appeal to open a company investigation and impose interim measures. That same day, without a hearing, the court issued immediate measures that took effect at once. They included suspending Zhang from his role as executive director of Nexperia and placing Nexperia's shares under the custody of an independent third party. These measures were to remain in place until the October 6th hearing, at which oral arguments would be heard and a ruling on the interim measures would be issued. Filed in the morning, interim measures by evening. Wingtech executives called the speed unusual in the Netherlands. After October 1st, Zhang's managerial authority was suspended. Nexperia's European executive swiftly cut off his internal email, communications, and login access. This also blocked us, as the respondents, from reasonably obtaining evidence. Our Dutch counsel believes there were procedural flaws, a Wingtech executive said. Looking back, we were too gentle. They shut off Zhang's accounts the very next day. The evidence submitted by the executives ran to more than 500 pages, including email exchanges with the ministry dating back to Nexperia's initial outreach in 2024. We needed time to digest the language and to read through the 500 pages. We also needed time to prepare our evidence and objections, the Wingtech executive said, but the request to delay the hearing was denied. We had only 2 working days. Counting the weekend, it was 5 days. The hearing was set for the 6th. It was very unfair. On the afternoon of October 6th, the Enterprise Chamber held the hearing. On October 7th, the court largely upheld the immediate measures. At present, Zhang has left the Netherlands, but he has not returned to China. He remains the actual controller of Wingtech. Wingtech executives stay in contact with him, but say they do not know where he is. That concludes today's narration. Through the voices of China's industrial thinkers, we've explored how policy, technology, and strategy converge in the country's push to rise through semiconductors and global supply chains. For clarity and flow, some parts of the original conversation have been summarized or slightly adjusted, Certain technical or context-heavy sections have also been refined to make them easier for international audiences to follow. If you would like to read the full transcript or discuss the ideas in more depth, you are welcome to reach out to us directly. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe to How China Thinks. Thank you for listening and see you next time.